Welcome to my podcast, Imperfectly Charming. Sue, thank you so much for joining me today. So, we are going to be diving into a topic that touches so many of us, peri and post menopause. It's a season of life that brings changes and challenges and opportunities for growth. So, I think our intentions today are to have this conversation and honor everyone's journey, including our own, and to embrace this time with grace and compassion. And I would like everybody listening to come into this dialogue with an open heart and curiosity for all things post, pre, peri, menopause. So, my guest today is Sue Schmitt, and she and I have been connected, I think, just since 2024. We are in the same women's group, and I really appreciate you having this conversation with us today. I'm going to give a little bit of Sue's bio, and then I'll ask her to add anything if she has something to add at the end. Sue is a dedicated health and wellness professional with a dynamic background spanning decades in holistic healing and fitness. Starting her journey as a clinical medical assistant, Sue discovered less invasive approaches to wellness, leading her to certifications as a group fitness instructor, medical exercise specialist, and a personal trainer. Her exploration deepened through yoga, where she connected physical health with breath, mindfulness, and intention. This passion inspired the creation of Shakti Studio, a yoga and movement hub in Annapolis, Maryland. Sue's journey expanded into Ayurveda, becoming a board-certified Ayurvedic health counselor and an IAYT certified yoga therapist. She educates and advocates for natural health solutions. Sue's mission is to inspire vibrant health and joyful living for all. What did I miss?
That's a pretty good synopsis, actually. I've actually had people ask me where I've been trained because they've never had a teacher like me before. And I think what that bio says is that I've had probably 40 years, 35 years of wellness, fitness, yoga, Ayurveda sort of fusion. And so it's all mixed together in a nice little soup.
And you also dabble into oils, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
use aromatherapy a lot. When I'm working privately, I work with them a lot. And I teach, when I teach my yoga classes in person, I use them because I think aromatherapy is really a powerful medicine that we as sort of general people don't really even think about much. We just think about, oh, it smells nice. I'm going to light this candle. It smells nice. But there's an actual science to the smell and our chemistry that can actually help us. So yeah.
And I have been learning about that, and I know that to be true. And for some reason, it's like keeps popping out of my head. So I think you and I need to have a session on what would be a good place for me to start.
Yeah, yeah, aromatherapy is really powerful. And I think the biggest thing that people just don't really understand, and I didn't know it either before I started to educate myself, was that a lot of stuff that you buy in the stores is really toxic.
Yes, I am
And
learning
people
that.
just really don't know. And they think, well, I'm just going to use this candle or use this aromatherapy in a diffuser, but it's toxic and it will give us headaches and it will make us nauseous
And it messes with our hormones, doesn't
and it
it?
messes with our hormones. Yes, it
Is
does.
there anything that you can think in particular that you see in the that they could look for not to buy?
Well, anything that, so if it's a candle and you flip it over and it says soy and natural fragrance, the name natural fragrance is an umbrella term for they can put anything in there they want. So it needs to say something like organic lavender oil or organic lavender something, right? Those are the only two things in there. Maybe something normal like beeswax or something like that. But when you start reading all the back and there's like 20 things listed on the candle and you don't know what they are, put it back.
Okay. And I know that's to be true with foods as well. I know that natural flavors, they
Yeah.
also hide all those toxic
Yes.
ingredients.
Yeah,
And
there's a
you
lot of
don't know what's good in
toxicity
that.
in women's skincare, makeup products, perfume products. There's a lot of toxicity in food. And the essential oils had a big boom about 10 years ago or so, and everybody was making them and they were everywhere.
And they're probably not regulated, right? They're just,
No. No,
Yeah,
they're not regulated. The company that I work with regulates itself and set its own standards so that the rest of the industry would try to follow suit. But, it costs money to do that.
right.
And companies don't necessarily want to spend that money. So
Mhm.
anyway, that's another conversation we should actually have. That'd be great.
Yeah. All right. Maybe, yeah, we'll have a second a follow-up on something else like that, another topic. So
Cool.
today we are talking about pre, post, peri-menopause, all of those above titles. And I guess I'll start by asking you a few questions, if
Sure.
that's okay. I pulled some. So can you share your perspective on the importance of addressing women's health, particularly during pre and post menopause?
That's a big one. So typically when we're younger, prior to perimenopause, and perimenopause can start 10 years before you actually have menopause, which is the last day, what is that? That 12-month, I haven't had a period. So let's just identify those markers. So when that 12, let's say you had a period January 1, 2023, and then you went all the way through 2023 and you hit January 1, 2024, and you still didn't have a period, that day is considered menopause. Anything above it and beyond is post, and anything earlier is peri. So,
I do get confused with menopause and postmenopause. Is
right.
menopause just that day and then
Yes.
it's postmenopause?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
And
right.
it's a clinical language. So if you look it up in a medical library, that's what it will tell you. But
Okay.
we interchange this word all the time. But the perimenopause part, let's say you had your last day and your menopause day and you were 52. The research shows us that as long as 10 years, as far back as 10 years, we can start perimenopause symptoms. Now, not everybody does it 10 years. Some are 8, some are 5. It's all varied. But to answer your question, when we are in that very active phase of life in our early 40s, usually, we're not thinking about that. And we're typically busy and don't want to be distracted with all the things. And so we'll medicate ourselves with caffeine or chocolate, or, take something to go to sleep at night because we can't sleep, or, all of the different things. And so if we don't pay attention to those things and we get to menopause, our bodies are really run down is the wrong word. We've lost our resilience. Not only did we lose our hormone structure, but because we weren't paying attention all those years, we broke things down. We broke part of our organ structure and physiology down. And so when you get on the other side of menopause into postmenopause, when you don't have a hormonal structure to support you, primarily estrogen, things start to happen. So the earlier we can pay attention to women's health, no matter how young you are, the better you're going to go through perimenopause and live your life in postmenopause.
I do love the idea of this coming to the forefront because I knew nothing. My doctors told me nothing about hormones. It was like they never had a conversation with me, and I'm hoping that that there can be more research and studies around women's health um,
Mhm.
because it's lacking so
Well,
much.
and I would say same for me. There was some, because I was in the holistic world, there was some talk around, oh, well, take this for your hot flashes and try that for your sleep. But it wasn't really an organized system, and people didn't use the word. I don't even know if they even talked about perimenopause. Wasn't even a language. So there are a lot of doctors, primarily women, that are challenging the status quo with how these doctors have been approaching perimenopause and even menopause and beyond. Um, so I think there is going to be a lot more research. Here's the crazy thing. Most of the research that's been done, aside from the Women's Health Initiative study, which was a real, it wasn't done properly. Let's just say that. And then because it wasn't done properly, the results weren't analyzed properly, and then it scared the bejeebers out of everybody. So everybody just stopped using hormones altogether. And perimenopause is, when I look at it through my lens of Ayurveda, it's about hormones, yes, but it's also about how are you living your life and what kinds of foods are you eating and how are you nourishing yourself. So that it's really a time of, well, you said it, it's a time of nourishing, it's a time of compassion, it's a time of we're moving and transitioning to an entire new version of ourselves. And rather than go through it, clutching and clawing and digging through the dirt because you're so miserable, why don't you go through it with some understanding and maybe a little self-compassion so that you can
And
do
that
that?
is where I find myself because this year I have been on a hormonal journey to try and figure mine out. And it has been, I haven't had a lot of compassion. It's been more frustration or kind of mad at myself, like, why is my motivation and why is my energy so low? And I need to be more compassionate towards myself, but it's hard when you feel like you're failing or you feel lazy or just not motivated.
Mm-hmm.
So, at least I have that awareness.
Right.
Um, and I do try to show myself, but on the other hand, sometimes I'm just mad at myself. Uh,
Mm-hmm. And a lot of the doctors out there right now, they're talking about chaos internally. You've got an internal chaos going on, so it's really hard. Even that language is really negative. It really truly is because you're implying that there's just this crazy going on that you've got to get a handle on. And the reality is there isn't if you take hormones, if you decide to do that, you can manage it a little bit easier or better that way. But most people don't even know to do that until it's much later and they've been going through years of discomfort. Um, and so it is hard because you just want to go out and live your life and you want to do your things. And these other symptoms, if we will, I call them imbalances, they feel like they get in your way, but they're actually the body's trying to tell you something. And we're really good as women of ignoring it and saying, yeah, I'm too busy. I don't want to deal with you. I'm just going to take an aspirin, cover up my headache, and go. Um, Drink another cup of coffee because I'm exhausted, but I got this to do or that to do. We're really good at that. And what would it feel like if we were exhausted, if we just stopped and took a nap for 20 minutes?
Amen.
I
Everybody's on
mean,
the hamster wheel.
nothing is going to change in 20 minutes. You and I both know we both meditate every morning for 20 minutes. There is a time every once in a while where I'm like, yeah, I got so much to do and I don't have 20 minutes. We all have 20 minutes. So
Even five is meditation, right?
that's right. That's right. And that's a nourishing thing to do for your mind and for your body. So I think I have a situation with a family member, and she's going through perimenopause, and she's also going through an illness. And the illness has forced her to rest. She doesn't like it one bit, but it's forcing her to rest. And because it's doing that, her perimenopause symptoms are getting better.
Oh, okay. So for those people that are just entering or worried about, is there symptoms or are they just all different for like when you start going into perimenopause?
I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's a crazy amount, like 45 symptoms you can have, different. Everybody's different. From brain fog, the most common ones are hot flashes, irregular periods, sleep dysregulation, hot sweats when you're sleeping, brain fog, like you can't think right, like your brain is not working the way it used to work. Um, those are really common ones. Weight gain, edema. Most women will have some form of those. And then there's all kinds of other ones like depression. And then women get put on antidepressants. That happened to me. Um, any kind of disturbance in your body. Just think anything that is not normal. You've been coming along 20s and 30s, and you hit your 40s, and all of a sudden you start getting all these digestive problems. It's not digestive problems, it's probably a hormone thing. Or you start getting joint pain.
Is there something that like one or two things that you would recommend that they start with and to understand if it's perimenopause or is it different for everybody?
It's really different for everybody. It's so the way that as you know, I have an Ayurvedic training, and Ayurveda teaches us that our body is always trying to come into what we call sattva, or balance or harmony. And we'll go off it and then we come back, and then we go off it again and we come back. The body's always working to come back to this balanced, functional place. And when we start to get these hormone imbalances, based on who we are constitutionally, will show up in our imbalances. So I'll give you an example. So I am what Ayurveda calls a pitta. I'm full of fire. And there's a whole teaching around doshas and our primary constitution. So when my doshic constitution gets out of balance because my hormones are all over the place, my primary symptoms are heat related. I get rashes, I have hot flashes, I get night sweats, I get angry. These are all heat related problems. I didn't really gain weight. I didn't really have edema. I didn't have a lot of other things that other women will get because of their constitution. Does that make sense?
It does. Yes.
And like, you're going to be different than me. So if you were of a constitution we call vata, which is more air and ether, your imbalances would be sleep irregularity or digestive problems or anxiety. And so when I look at people, when I help them work through this time of their life, the first thing I do is I try to identify their constitution. And then I look at their imbalances and I go, and imbalances are symptoms. I just try not to use that language because symptoms sound negative and something to fix.
Well,
Imbalances mean that our bodies are out of balance and we're just trying to bring it back. That's all we're
I
trying.
like that. I like that terminology, Sue.
Right.
Imbalances rather than symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not,
It does sound more gentle.
yeah. And this is a natural process. We are not sick and we are not crazy and we are not depressed. We're not. So I don't like to use all that medical terminology because it still implies the negative. I mean, I think back to how our culture, there's 3 times in a woman's life that really they metamorph into something different. And the first time is puberty. Now in the culture, puberty is more celebrated and more talked about and more understood. So the girls coming through it really have a better sense. When I was going through it, no. And then what's the next one? Pregnancy. And so pregnancy is really, like you're a wonderful being because you're going to have this human but you're still having all these imbalances. And during, while you're pregnant, at the birth, and post pregnancy. So this is the same. It's the exact same. And they, primarily the studies have been really, really, really limited in this genre and in this community. So I think you're right. The more people are talking about it, the more the younger generation are demanding answers, the more studies and the more money will get put into these kinds of things.
I know that because I've been talking about this, my daughter, who's 30, who now she's really in tune with her body. I mean, she always has been. She's got her degree in biology, so she has that kind of mind. But I think her hearing what I'm saying, I think it's gonna help her to recognize maybe those symptoms sooner or those imbalances sooner.
That's right. It
Yeah,
absolutely will. And the more she can educate herself around what's available, because that's always the next question. It's like, okay, I've got this going on. What can I do about it? What can I
right,
take?
right.
What's going to make me feel better? And so the argument out in the world right now is, do I take hormones or don't I take hormones? Because that seems to be the only real answer. And the reality of it is certain people can take hormones and they help them, and certain people shouldn't take them. And that's really a personal decision based on who they are as a human, what their history is, what their relationship is with their doctor. I'll tell you a personal story. I came to bioidentical hormone therapy by accident. And I am so eternally grateful. And I know there's no accidents and there's no like coincidences, I teach this because this is what my path was and this is what I know now. But when I went through when I had menopause and then I'm in postmenopause, I really started to have a lot of symptoms that I didn't understand. I was very healthy, fit professional, and all of a sudden I couldn't do a lot, and I felt really tired and weak. And so I went to my naturopath, and he said, listen, we're going to test your cortisol and your adrenals and all that stuff. While we're at it, let's find out where your hormones are. And just for clarity, cortisol is a hormone. Okay. So in Ayurveda, we actually talk about stress and sex hormones as they're balancing. So you've got your stress hormones, which is adrenaline and cortisol. And then we've got our sex hormones, which is progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. Okay. And in our case, progesterone and estrogen are the ones that are the most affected when we go through menopause, right? And so in the world of Ayurveda, the stress hormones are usually kicked on pretty high living in our culture. Most of us are stressed out on some level. We don't live a nice, even, balanced life. We don't nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves and rest enough. And so these adrenaline and cortisol hormones are kind of kicked on all the time. And the estrogen and the progesterone is what helps balance these. It helps keep them in check. And then the progesterone helps keep estrogen in check, because too much estrogen, you know what happens. We get too high of estrogen if our hormones are fluctuating and the estrogen's too high for whatever reason, we start getting tumors, because estrogen is a building hormone. Now, we could get cancer tumors or we could get non-malignant tumors, but it's too much growth. It's too much building.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we go through perimenopause and menopause and then beyond, sometimes the stress hormones are super high, cortisol and adrenaline, and our sex hormones are too low, which is a bad combination on so many levels. That's where you end up with thyroid problems and adrenal problems and all kinds of things, which is rampant in our country for women. So I was having trouble with this adrenal and cortisol issue. So he said, well, while we're checking that, let's check this other stuff. And I found out that I had no testosterone, none. I had low estrogen and low progesterone because I had gone through menopause, but I had no testosterone, which puts me in the label of estrogen dominance. And I was
Okay.
on the path to cancer. And he said, oh, well, we can't do this. And so he put me on bioidentical hormones right away. And I didn't go on them because of perimenopause and menopause. I went on them because I had to balance my situation or I was going to be in trouble. And I've never gone off them, because what we know now is if you take them at the proper dose at the proper time of your life, you won't have these diminished imbalances that we call osteoporosis and heart disease and dementia.
What type of doctor is this that you see for this, for your hormones?
Well,
Is
the doctor that put me on it was a naturopath. He's a doctor. They're not licensed in every state. So now I live in New Mexico. I had to find a different doctor. But you could find a functional medicine doctor or an integrative doctor that works with bioidentical hormones. That's the question you have to ask. I just wanted to change doctors for a different reason. And I probably called at least 4 or 5 doctor offices here in New Mexico. And that was the first question I asked. And they all said, no, we don't work with those.
okay, that is a good tip.
Yeah. So if
Um,
you go to a doctor and you're hoping that you're going to have this conversation, they don't even know. They don't even know what it is. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to you. Because they know bioidentical hormones are much, much safer than synthetic based hormones. We know that.
I'm not doing bioidenticals. I'm using supplements to try and get my levels in order. That's what the person I'm working with
Right.
wanted to try. So, do you have any information around the two, like one versus the other,
Well, I
or
always think it's a good idea to start with supplement first.
yeah?
So Ayurveda, going back to my specialty, when we're looking at hormone balancing, it's not just the hormones. The hormones are our messengers in our body, and they're fluctuating because we went through menopause, right? But the things that can influence our hormones, especially during perimenopause, is lifestyle and diet and our emotional well-being. How do we manage our mind and our thinking? So that's the first thing I start asking questions around is like, what do you do on a daily basis? How much sleep do you get? What's your typical food sources about? Are you doing any supplementation? Are you doing any supportive, like, drinking mushroom water or taking things like ashwagandha, which is a really wonderful supplement through Ayurveda, which helps with balancing your energy level, not making you have energy, but helping your body find that natural balance. So those are the questions I ask right off the bat. And we start there. And then we add, in my personal world, we add Ayurvedic herbs and supplements. And then if it doesn't work, then we get pushed to a doctor and start thinking about hormone replacement.
What does that mean? What's an Ayurvedic herb
Well,
consist?
I just used one, ashwagandha. It's a supplement that helps anybody find their natural balance. So there's no contraindication. You can take it with anything. And like my doctor now, my functional medicine doctor, she told me to take it. And I said, oh, I'm already on it. She goes, great.
And
So
which one is that? That's the ashwagandha or something different?
ashwagandha,
Oh, okay,
ashwagandha.
ashwagandha.
Yeah.
But you
Ashwagandha.
probably have to get that from a reputable source, right? You can't just get
Yeah.
it.
When I work with people, I send them to certain sites. Because even if you buy it, let's say I tell you to go and I tell you to buy ashwagandha, I tell you to get a certain level, and I tell you to get it from Banyan Botanicals. That's one of the places I send people. And you go to Amazon and you see it on Amazon, it may or may not come from Banyan Botanicals because people mess with stuff on that
Yeah.
site.
But sometimes the company is on Amazon and you
Yeah.
click on that link or you click on the company, right? Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I would do. I would click on the company. Um, so yeah, it's people don't really, it's really hard for women pre-menopause. Let's just, the 40s, right? It's hard for them to stop and look and redirect. Like, oh, I always have this whatever coffee and a donut for breakfast, and then I'm busy and I'm going. And the first thing I tell them is like, you got to slow down and you got to give yourself a half an hour to have a really warm cooked breakfast and not run out the door.
Mhm.
That's hard for people.
It is.
It's really hard. They just want the pill and go. So it's a challenge, but I think if women were educated around the importance of self-care and the importance of really nourishing their body when they're going through this really big change, you basically shape shift into another person.
Right.
Like if you think of yourself when you were like 38 and you think of yourself now if you're in your 50s, you're different.
Oh yeah. So the pre-peri, so I had a girlfriend ask me a question to ask you.
Okay.
So she feels more anxious and overwhelmed, like her body is processing stuff much different. And she wondered if you could answer, how does the body change in processing stress in perimenopause? Do you know, are you able to help her with that?
Well, that's a really good question, and I touched on it earlier. So if you think about your stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, they react at different levels to different stresses. So adrenaline is your really quick, somebody startles you and you go, right? And then you calm back down. Cortisol is somebody startles you and you stay in that startled state for 3 hours. That's cortisol, and they work together. Usually when women are going through some kind of process, what did you say your friend was going through? She was trying to process her stress.
She just like the way her body handled being anxious and stressed, she felt like it was harder on her body. And
Yes,
she said she felt like the train was always going to derail itself every
right.
day.
So when you're going through perimenopause, what's happening, your estrogen primarily is dropping. And then
Okay.
it fluctuates throughout the month because you're still cycling, right? But the estrogen that you've always had to keep everything kind of in balance is now gone. It's like you took it away. And so
Okay.
the stress hormones kind of go awry. They just kind of go all over the place. And if you think about hormones, I always thought this was a great way to think about hormones because you're like, what the hell are hormones? Like, what do they even do? I don't even know. People talk about them all the time, but they actually talk to each other. They messenger to each other about what's going on. And then they send those messages to your brain and your body. So if your body's getting the message that it's scared and anxious, those fight or flight hormones kick on, and blood flow changes, heart rate changes, brain chemistry changes, and then you've got to get these sex hormones going. Okay, it's all right. It's all right. Calm down, right? So that's why she's having a harder time. And the thing I would tell her, because she's using the words anxiety and stress, I would tell her to do things throughout the day that she can that's going to nourish her. I don't know what that is. It's different for everybody. Sometimes it's just turning all the screens off and sit and have a nice relaxed cup of tea and watch the birds.
In the moment, or can she do it later? Because I know that she's very busy during the day. And maybe she can step away for 5 minutes. Is it as easy as that, as stepping away into quiet for 5 minutes?
You answer that because you do meditation.
It's interesting that you say that because my hormone levels, when they came back, they were like the highest of the high.
Mm,
And in part of my process is, she was like, okay, do you meditate? I'm like, I meditate, most days of the week, 20 minutes. So I'm thinking, what would my life be if I don't meditate? I'm like, would it be way worse?
probably. And the
Yeah.
other thing is that, doing something in the morning is great. In Ayurveda, we have something called the daily routine. The word is dinacharya. And it basically calls the rhythm of the day or our daily routine. And what's important is that you start your day with some kind of nourishing, supportive routine. And then you think about the middle of the day, like maybe there's something small you could do that could help this rhythm stay nice and calm. And then you do something in the evening to do the same thing and to set you up for sleep. And so one of my funny things I've always thought about is I remember asking the group of women I was teaching Ayurveda, and I asked them what their evening routine is, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" I like turn the TV on, and I go to bed. They didn't even have an understanding that there could be a way to set yourself up to calm your nervous system and calm your body so you could go to sleep. And the same thing in the morning. If you think about how you start your day, most people just stumble out of bed and drink the coffee to get the hit, right? What would happen if you did some nourishing practices? You could still drink your coffee, but in Ayurveda, we do warm water with lemon every morning. And when I do that, you think, oh, that's no big deal. But what you're doing is you're hydrating and detoxifying your tissues first thing. Then you have the coffee. And
Mhm.
there's something that happens internally. It's like, oh, I'm doing this really good thing for myself. And then that turns into something else. So
And making it intentional, right? Like making it intentional and knowing that you're doing something good
right,
for yourself,
that's right.
not just
That's right.
doing it because you think it's good for you. It's like really taking it in and being
Yeah.
intentional about it.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, and that's really part of it is why are we doing what we're doing? It isn't just to check it off the list. It's because we're trying to set ourselves up for a way that our bodies can manage itself during these really up and down times. And what can happen, and I don't know if you're in this place or not, but we can get so caught up with, I got to know what's happening and I got to fix what's happening because I feel crazy, that we lose sight of the day to day living. We just need to get an answer.
That's, I think, where I'm at, to be honest with you,
Right.
because I've been doing this for most of the year and I want answers.
Right.
Uh, yeah,
And sometimes
and
there aren't any.
I know, but then it's
Sometimes
like you
there's
got to
not.
try something else, and you know,
Again, this person I know is going through the same thing. And when you're not feeling well, that's our instinct is to try to find the answer to fix it. But I will say in the world of Ayurveda, there's nothing to fix.
mm,
It's balance or imbalance. So I'll give you a really good example. I gave you an example about my personal experience going through perimenopause with my hot flashes and my night sweats. I mean, they were ridiculous. 2 and 3 times a night, I would wake up, change everything because I was soaking wet and hot. And had I known then what I know now, I could have managed that so much better,
Mm.
you know? And that brings me to one of the other principles of Ayurveda. So we figure out who we are on a constitutional level. It doesn't mean like you're Cheryl and I'm Sue. It's more like how are we put together by the elements of nature. And then we look at our daily routine and what we are or are not doing to support our daily nature. And then we look at what we call the dance of opposites. And so a simple example is when you're really hot, what do?
You try to cool yourself off.
That's right. Because the body's like, I am super hot. I got to cool myself down. So it might be drinking some water, or it might be going in the shade if you're outside, or in my case, in my bed, I took all my clothes off and, tried to change the channel. So when you learn that some things that you do can kick off your symptoms. So if I'm pitic and I'm eating hot, fiery foods at night for dinner, it's going to kick off more of a fiery response in my body at night, which is exactly what was happening. Or if I have the glass of red wine with dinner and the fiery food, then I'm really in trouble, right? But I didn't have any of that understanding back then. I thought I was eating really healthy. I was, but I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it because the general population told me to do that. And that's one of the things that Ayurveda talks about, is that we're all really unique people, and we have to understand our uniqueness so that we don't follow whatever's out there in the world because we think that's the next best thing, because it may not be for you.
I think we probably could have a whole nother thing just on Ayurvedic stuff another date
Yeah.
because yeah, I'd love to learn more about that. Um, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, when you were talking about your hot flashes, so I never had a single hot flash. Like, how does that happen? So I thought, here I am, so lucky, lucky, lucky. Um, and then when I started taking the supplements, all of a sudden I'd be like, is this a hot flash? What is happening? So I'm like, are the supplements bringing on these hot flashes? It was the weirdest thing.
Probably could have. Yeah.
And then I thought, well, is that good? Because my hormones are, I don't know. I don't know
See,
what that,
again, it's really confusing, right? And
yes,
so what I like to think about with Ayurveda is that if you get and I'm not trying to diagnose you at all, but if you understand that you have more air and ether in your system, like I have more fire and water in my system, so I'm going to be more prone to the hot flashes. You're going to be more prone to the sleep disturbances and the erratic thinking and the digestive problems. These are just a few I'm listing. You're going to have more of that. I'm not going to have that, but they're all symptoms of perimenopause.
right.
And
It's,
so then you go, okay, well, if I'm having these symptoms, people that have a lot of air and ether in their body need a lot of grounding. They need a lot of structure and warm cooked foods and slowing down. And so there's 3 doshas in Ayurveda. I just mentioned 2. The third one is kapha, which is earth and water. And that one can be really sluggish and kind of like I can't get out of my own way. And so when those imbalances really start to kick in, that's where all the weight gain comes in and the edema comes in. And we have all of them in our system. We just have primarily one. So it's kind of fun to kind of pay attention to that. And then you have another tool in your toolbox. That's what I like to say.
mm, one of the things that you talked about earlier and that I have been hearing so much about is how important sleep is for us.
Mhm.
And I've been hearing this word sleep hygiene, sleep hygiene. Everybody's using that word. And do you have any insight on that? I'm guessing that that would affect our hormones a lot
Yeah.
if we don't get proper sleep.
Well, if you think about what you do at night, your nighttime routine sets you up for a good night's sleep, which sets you up for the following day. if you have no nighttime routine and you have terrible sleep, you have a not great day.
Mm-hmm.
And on it goes, which is why they're telling us now it's so important. And we have been part of a culture where being multitasking, hyper busy, managing on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and yeah, I can do it, I'm tough, was actually a badge of honor. And they're finding out now, especially for women, men have a different hormone structure and they can do it. Doesn't mean that women are weaker. It's just we have a different hormone structure. And then God put us through menopause, and now we've got an even different one. Yeah.
And theirs is testosterone, right? I mean,
Well,
that's
they have all the hormones too, but they have primarily a higher dosage of testosterone. But I've worked with many, many men who get a hormone imbalance just like we get. Their stress hormones are cortisone and adrenaline up the yin yang because they've been running at both ends. And then they end up starting to break apart when they're in their 60s. Yeah. So it happens. It really does happen. And we just don't see it as often with men because they seem to have a more, it's like more resiliency in their structure. We fluctuate so much as women with our hormone structures always. I mean, we cycle every month.
right.
So it makes sense to me when I understand that. It's like men are not better, they just have a different structure. And of course, all the research was done on men.
I was just going to say that
All right.
because their structure is easier,
Well, yeah. And
less things to worry about.
when I was in the fitness world, and we would have all these guidelines about how hard people work or how high their heart rate should. And you look back at the research, again, I didn't know what I didn't know back then. It was all done on college males.
Yeah.
And we were pushing women to do that same thing.
Yeah. But yeah, crazy.
Yeah, it is a little cray cray. So my biggest takeaway for women going through perimenopause is that I would not dismiss any symptom as nothing. And if it's something that you never had before, and all of a sudden you're starting to develop these new symptoms, I would pay attention. Not does I wouldn't say diagnose yourself in perimenopause, but just start to understand that you're going through this early change, this early hormonal change, and it is going to affect you. I mean, I
And
talked to this
maybe
one young
very,
woman once, and I said to her, she was like early 40s and she was having trouble. And I said, it sounds to me like you're going through perimenopause. And she really got mad at me. I'm not going through perimenopause. That's ridiculous. I'm only in my 40s. I'm like, okay. And then a couple of years later, she came back to me and went, yeah, I think you were right.
yeah, yeah, because we don't want to use those words, right? Like they're scary and they sound old.
Yeah, but I mean,
Post.
what's worse? I mean, getting diagnosed as a depressant woman and getting put on antidepressants, or being told you have IBS and being put on digestive reflux medicine so that it messes up your system forever. I mean, none of those are good answers.
Right.
I think it just makes us feel better to have an answer, but it's not the answer.
So maybe if people are starting to have imbalances, uh, maybe start being curious, maybe take some little, like a little journal. Would you suggest like maybe reaching out to a functional practitioner or a holistic or a naturopath? Because most of the medical doctors aren't trained in that, correct?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And even women doctors who specialize in women's health aren't trained in it. They might be trained in pregnancy or fertilization or something, but they might not be trained in that. You have to ask specific questions. And then if you really want like a different perspective, so you've got the medical perspective and even functional medicine, it's holistic, but it's still Western medicine. It is.
Mm.
Then you look at, like in my world, it's Ayurveda, but you could look at Chinese medicine. You could look at anything else that would give you a different way or perspective. That's what I keep saying about Ayurveda. It has a different perspective that can help women understand where they are, have the empowerment to make their own choices, to see if like you said, be curious to see if, well, if I do it this way, do I feel better? Or do I do it that way and I feel better? You start to play with your own constitution and your own body reactions, and then you start to figure out what works for you.
Yeah. Um, so for me, I just wanted to ask a question, even though I'm not peri, I'm post. So the supplement you felt like that is a good starting point for me.
So, yeah.
Um, I originally took a Dutch test, which is a complete hormone panel test, and it showed where I was out of balance. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why I was put on these supplements. I'm getting ready to take another test to see if levels have improved. So I am hoping I see the needle move on that. So
Well, I think whoever you're working with is, you interrupt the system with as least amount of disruption as you can to see if the body will readjust itself. It never makes sense to go from 0 to 100. You do a little bit. I mean, I started with natural remedies like DHEA to help manage my hormones, and it didn't work for me. So my naturopath put me on hormones first, and most of them didn't work. So that's why I went on bioidenticals. But everybody's different. And
yeah,
even back then, I didn't understand Ayurveda the way I understand it now. So it would have really been helpful, because I think hormones or not, your daily life and the way you live your life has to shift when you're in perimenopause and beyond. Otherwise, you're just going to be miserable and sick.
yeah.
You are. And I know too many women that are not listening and just want to keep doing the same thing. And
Because it's easier to do nothing than to try and figure it out. I
right. But here's what happens: the imbalances start really little, and then they get louder and louder and louder. And, then we're looking at joint replacements and high blood pressure medicine and early
right.
onset dementia. I mean, it's a real thing. So I don't want to go there. I know I don't want to go there. I would much rather try to deal with my imbalances early on and see where I go.
And that includes nutrition for your body and good sleep and movement
Mhm.
and rest. Oh,
The three big things that I keep hearing about from all different organizations is move your body, holistic, really good, clean food, and sleep. Those are kind of the big three. I always add stress in there, managing stress. And it's a lot. So you start where you can, you
it
know?
is a lot, especially I know I've been talking about this lately, is the nutrition. There's so many toxic things in our food now that,
Mhm.
we trust that we're eating good, healthy food and it's not. So
And I'm
it's
assuming that your person you're working with is addressing that also.
I mean, I've been addressing that. Like I've been looking at labels and, getting more knowledge on those like natural flavors and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Eating organic when I can, or grass-fed, grass-finished beef. So yeah, just
Yeah, I know but when you learn it and then you try it and it makes you feel better, it's kind of a simple thing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been in this world for such a long time. And I mean, I used to start my day in the fitness world because it was not anything anybody talked about. It was really more about calories, right? I used to start my day with coffee and donut. And then I would
Mm,
teach, run myself ragged. Maybe I would have something to eat at lunch. Maybe too busy, can't be bothered, still keep running around. You do that long enough, your body says, no, no more.
I
So,
was listening to a podcast today earlier of the Diary of a CEO, and
mm,
a man was on there. He actually was a pediatrician and was just talking about sugar being so bad for us. And it was just so interesting to hear the perspective of how bad things that we put in our body, that how they really mess with us, including our hormones and just everything.
yeah. And the hormone disruptors are a real thing. that people don't pay any attention to. We said that in the very beginning. You know, what we put on our skin, not only what we eat, but what we put on our skin,
What we
um,
wash our hair with,
what we
what
wash our hair with, you
we
know,
brush our
what kind of
teeth with.
perfume, what kind of perfumes are we going to use?
Yeah.
You know, ever since I've been in aromatherapy, and I learned a lot when I entered that world, I don't ever use perfume. Never. I might put an oil on me, but I'm not going to put any perfume on me. Um, and it's just those simple little things that you start to make a little shift and your body goes, oh, now I can function better. It's
Yeah.
just little. So when I
Shift.
work with, yeah, when I work with people, I try to give them just one little thing to do. Like what I've been doing in my business this past year is I've been introducing one healthy habit a month. And so each month I talk about it, why, and then I encourage people to do it. And I said, you know, if you did it for the whole month, you'd have 12 habits, new habits that you may or may not have done before. And I think that's powerful because some like lemon water with a warm water with lemon is a simple, simple thing to do. It's just a change of habit.
And when you say that, it's like a 8 ounce cup of a half a squeeze lemon or something in it
Yep.
every morning.
Yep.
Is there any other ones you can give us as a quick hit for
Quick
people?
hit. Well, I would definitely do warm water. Don't do cold water. Cold water, ice water is really hard on our digestive system. So warm water,
No matter what time of day or
right?
just in the morning?
Warm or temperate? Well, for the morning water, I would do warm for sure. And the amount of lemon is based on your tolerance. So a half a lemon might be too much. You might want a quarter of a lemon. Um, Ayurveda teaches us never to drink ice water or ice drinks at all, ever, because it makes our digestion harder. So if you already have digestive issues, it just makes it that much harder. That's a hard one in the winter, I mean, in the summer, you know, because
Mhm.
we're hot. Um, oh, I know a really good one for perimenopause, seeing so we're talking about this. Ayurveda has a teaching called Abhyanga, which is body oiling massage, where you put oil, warm oil, specifically to your body constitution all over. But here's a quick tip because nobody wants to take that time. Do your feet. So you have warm oil, you rub your feet with the warm oil, you put socks on, and you go to bed.
How do you warm your oil?
I just do it in like a pot of warm water. Like I'll boil water and then I put the amount that I'm, you know, the jar that I'm using and I put it in there just to warm it up.
Okay.
Um, and the oil can be anything. Ayurveds usually will use sesame oil, but you can use any kind of oil as long as it doesn't have any stuff in it. It's got to
I
be clean.
use castor oil on my feet and rub it in and put socks on.
Perfect. And then
Yeah.
if you learned about aromatherapy, you might put something, a couple drops of essential oil in there.
Yes.
But that will help lots of things. It will help regulate your body temperature. It will help soothe your nervous system because anytime you put warm oil on your body, it will do that. And then it will help you sleep.
Hmm.
So it's a simple, simple one. On my website, I actually have a free recipe. I'm going to update a new one for castor oil and some ideas to put essential oils in them. But this foot cream recipe you make with like beeswax and olive oil, and I can't remember all the things. And I've been making it for a while and I give it away for gifts, and it's really lovely.
Would you be willing to give me that little recipe and I can put it in our show notes
Sure.
along with where we can get a hold of you, where all your links, we'll put that in there. And I would love to have you come back and talk more about Ayurvedic practices,
Yeah,
um,
I'd be happy to do that.
and
I
maybe
have
more on hormones too.
yeah, and I have a free offer that I created for perimenopause basically, and it's talking about doshic constitutions, the daily routine, and the balance of opposites. It just gives you like some tips that, you know, you can start to think about. I just want to say that, you know, women are freaking amazing people. Just being a woman is a wonderful experience, and you are not crazy and you are not sick and you are not broken. You're just going through a transition, and Ayurveda believes that the transition is evolving into another level of being. It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
And we're not looking for our symptoms, we're looking for our imbalances that our body wants to balance so bad, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So if you do this, like if you're having an imbalance and you don't know to change anything, the body can't get out of that imbalance. That's really the bottom line. And you're just trying to support it. That's all you're doing. It's a softer and more gentler and loving way to approach this time of life
Yeah, with grace,
with
with grace
grace and compassion. Yes.
and patience. Yeah, I need patience.
And patience. Yeah. We can all work on all those things.
I wanted to get quick fix those supplements to work like now.
I understand. I understand.
Well, I appreciate your time with us today, Sue. You've been such a lovely guest, and I look forward to seeing you most mornings. We meditate together, so I
Yeah.
look forward to that with you.
Thank you so much. I loved being here. It was a great conversation.
Thanks. Talk to you soon.
Bye.